The story begins by introducing Liang, a former university student. One ordinary day, his dog mischievously unplugged the alarm cable, causing it to fail. In his haste to get to class, Liang was involved in a car accident and found himself seemingly in the afterlife, meeting St. Peter. However, when he opened his eyes again, he was back in his own world, but it was now apocalyptic. He returned to the present moment to witness a group of people battling a massive mutated creature. Despite their valiant efforts, the creature regenerated as if unharmed. Initially, Liang entertained the idea that he might be the chosen one, destined to gain superpowers or a system like an anime, but he soon discovered how wrong he was. In his first life in this apocalypse, he was bitten to death by zombies while trying to lead survivors to safety. Upon awakening again, he found himself back at the starting point in time. In this second life, he succumbed to hunger. For his third life, he attempted to disguise himself as a zombie to scavenge for supplies, but the military mistakenly killed him. In his fourth life, a partner betrayed him, and so it went, with Liang dying in various ways. This marked his 10th life, and he was already weary and despondent, having lost hope of survival. Returning to the present situation with the group and the creature, they finally gave up their fight and fled, abandoning one of their comrades to the monster. The abandoned girl, with tears streaming down her face, pleaded for them to save her. Tito Yang, recognizing the futility of the situation and knowing he would be reborn regardless, decided to act before his inevitable death. He bravely rushed towards the imposing creature and sliced off one of its tentacles, specifically the one threatening the girl. The girl, witnessing this heroic act, thanked him profusely, though there was no time for lengthy conversations. Yang yelled at her to escape immediately and quickly made his way towards a mini SUV that looked promising. Inside, he began to eat and drink as if there were no tomorrow. Meanwhile, the angered octopus-like creature turned its attention to him, ready to eliminate him. Just as the creature was about to attack, Yang was struck by a severe headache and fainted. When Liang regained consciousness, the creature had vanished, and surprisingly, he felt perfectly fine. Suddenly, a voice spoke to him, congratulating him for activating the apocalyptic system. The voice introduced itself as Yin. Tito Liang, overjoyed at this revelation, became incredibly happy and tightly embraced the voice, Jean. With tear-filled eyes, he playfully threatened to report Jean for taking so long if he didn't provide an explanation for the delay. Jean calmly asked him to relax, explaining that the delay was due to a minor accident. Unbelievably, his roommate had stolen his charging cable. Tito Liang found this hard to believe, but acknowledged that it was better late than never. Curiously, he inquired about what Jean was going to give him. Jean responded that he already had, but first, Jean needed to explain his objective. As Liang had already experienced, he was in an apocalyptic world, and his mission was to save it. If he succeeded, he would return to his original world. Failure would result in elimination. Jean reassured him not to worry, as he had 10 lives, though it seemed he only had one remaining based on his experiences. However, with Jin's help, that would be more than enough. Without further ado, Jean activated his power. 3 Doritos later, the story abruptly shifted. Liang was now seen walking down a street with a small street stall. His first mission was to earn 50 crystals by selling snacks. Tito Liang was far from pleased and angrily questioned Jean why a supposed savior had to operate a street stall. His outburst attracted the attention of zombies, and fear taking over, Liang ran as fast as he could. A curious Jean asked him why he was running. Liang knew Jean was right, he must have some superpower. He then curiously asked Jean what his superpower actually was. Jean revealed Liang's stats, which were shockingly pitiful, explaining why he was almost caught by the zombies. Scared, Yang continued to run as fast as he could, angrily shouting at Jean and accusing him of lying about giving him a superpower. Jean insisted that he had, stating that the street stall was his superpower and that he shouldn't lose it as it was invaluable. Hearing this, Liang quickly returned to the stall, thinking it must have some hidden power. He grabbed a metal tube from the ground and began to strike at the approaching zombies, but one forcefully pushed him to the ground. Fortunately, he landed on the stall. A disheveled and frantic man started searching around for anything useful but found nothing. He then noticed several zombies closing in on him. Liang fiercely shook the stall, and surprisingly, the piece of cloth covering it saved him. Jean explained that as long as he was at the street stall, it protected him from any attack, whether from monsters or humans, nothing could harm him there. Overjoyed by this news of invincibility, Tito Liang started dancing. Jean cautioned him not to get too carried away, as the protection only lasted for 3 attacks per day. Furthermore, if he didn't complete his mission within the time limit, the protection would fail. Jean urged him to hurry and complete the mission as nightfall was approaching, and the monsters became more dangerous then. Liang acknowledged this, but questioned how he was supposed to sell anything when there wasn't a soul around. Abruptly, the narrative ended with a note from Brazzo, hinting at a continuation of the adventures of Titus Liang if a goal of 2,000 likes and 200 comments was reached, encouraging support and promising to continue the story if the goal was met. Suddenly, Liang spotted 3 figures approaching in the distance. He quickly prepared himself and called out to the men, inviting them to look at his products. The men were intrigued by the food Tito Liang was selling. Adopting a businesslike persona, he offered them a super offer, stating they could take everything for just 50 crystals. The men burst out laughing, incredulous that this idiot was asking for money. They turned serious and told him that they were in a good mood, and if he left immediately, they would spare his life. Liang, realizing they had no money, began to take back his products. The rats, as the men were referred to, became enraged that this fool didn't understand the situation and decided to kill him. Without hesitation, one of them fired a shot at Liang, but the attack was blocked by the stall's shield. The shot bounced off, causing the weapon to explode in the shooter's hand, and he fainted from the blast. His companions were in shock, believing that Liang possessed superpowers. The bald man declared that it was impossible, stating he had never seen anything so strange and that Liang looked utterly ridiculous. Adopting a very serious demeanor, they demanded to know what trick Liang had used. Like a true salesman, Liang told them to calm down, as they were addressing the chosen one who would save the world. He generously offered to forgive their disrespect if they spent 50 crystals on his products. The men, naturally, didn't believe him and refused, finding it absurd that this brat thought they were stupid. Enraged, they were about to beat him up, but as soon as one of them tried to strike Tito Liang, the shield activated, blocking the blow and breaking all the fingers on the attacker's hand. The other thug, who had just regained consciousness, yelled at his companion not to hesitate and to eliminate the child. Tito Liang knew that if both of them attacked, he would be in serious trouble, as the 3 shield blocks would quickly be used up. The small, blond boy, terrified, ran away, not wanting to meet St. Peter just yet. His companions didn't follow. Liang realized he had narrowly escaped. Suddenly, he noticed a bag left behind by the thugs. As he reached for it, he saw it move and, thinking it was an animal, cautiously opened it. To his surprise, a beautiful woman emerged, a waifu. Tito Liang was stunned by her beauty, but the girl, noticing his presence, lunged at him fiercely. It turned out she was a zombie girl. Terrified, he ran away as fast as his legs could carry him. She was surprisingly quick and began throwing things at him, trying to get him to stop. But it was no use. Just when he thought he was about to meet St. Peter again, he was surprised to see the girl become fascinated by the dried octopus that Tito had discarded. Yang realized she was hungry, so he gave her more to distract her. Unfortunately, he ran out of octopus. His only remaining option was to offer her some chips. To his surprise, she liked them. As they slowly approached a cliff with lava, Liang, when close enough, threw the bag of chips towards it. The hungry zombie girl eagerly tried to catch it. Tito Liang felt a pang of guilt, but what else could he do? He then noticed a high-quality dagger left by the men. Picking it up, he recognized the Thunder Legion logo etched on the hilt. He knew the Thunder Legion was a very dangerous group led by a powerful awakened individual, known for their ruthlessness. He realized he was in serious trouble if they caught him. He quickly began to pack up his stall, intending to leave, but then noticed a bag in the same bag where the zombie girl had been. Inside was a bag full of crystals, making him ecstatic as it was more than enough to complete his mission. Jean, however, informed him that he wasn't sure if those crystals would count because he hadn't earned them through sales at the stall. Liang argued that they should count because the zombie girl had eaten his snacks, and the crystals were in her bag, making it related to his business. Jean conceded that he had a point but still wasn't certain. Liang protested, arguing that monsters should also count towards his business prosperity. Like a petulant child, he threw a tantrum until Jean reluctantly agreed. Having seemingly completed the mission, Liang supposedly leveled up. He was no longer a simple rag but now had a Liang cart. As he approached the upgraded cart, he examined the products. Curious, he asked Jean what had happened to the vehicles and weapons he expected. Jean explained that it was a food stand, not an armory, and that he could use his points to buy products or improve his attributes. Tito Yang realized this was problematic, as the cart only protected him 3 times a day, and he couldn't hide inside it all the time. His priority was to improve his personal defenses. He asked Jean to allocate his points to strength. Tito Yang felt disappointed, noticing no immediate change. Suddenly, Jean announced that his next mission was to earn 100 crystals in sales and hire a waiter within 24 hours. Yang became angry, complaining about the short time frame and wondering where he would find an employee. Just then, a flyer landed on his face. He saw it was for the cafeteria near his university and wondered if the girl who worked there was still alive and if she might work for him. The thought of working with such beauty motivated him to search for her. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the zombie waifu was still alive and searching everywhere for the protagonist. The next morning, Liang finally arrived at the cafeteria. As soon as he opened the door, he startled a group of scared zombies. The creatures began to run, and naturally, followed him outside. One almost caught him, but fortunately, his cart's protection activated, saving him. Tito Liang cursed his luck, as he now only had 2 shield blocks remaining. The zombie he had encountered was still alive, now walking on all fours and angrily approaching Tito Liang. Noticing this, Liang nervously delivered a powerful kick, sending the zombie flying into a vending machine. The force of the blow caused the machine to fall, crushing the remaining zombies beneath it. Liang was shocked by the incredible increase in his strength. Jean suddenly announced that for defeating his first zombie, he had received a disposable raincoat. Liang felt disappointed when he saw it. Jean urged him not to underestimate it, explaining that it was a high-tech product, reliable and heat-insulating, and also capable of blocking harmful substances like radiation, although it was only for single use. Just then, in the distance, a huge horde began to approach. Tito Liang realized that the noise of the vending machine had attracted them. He knew he was in a dead end and that his tragic fate was sealed. Suddenly, he heard the girl from the cafeteria calling out to him from a distance. Tito Liang, without hesitation, ran towards her, narrowly escaping the horde by the skin of his teeth. Safe at last, Liang thanked the girl profusely, recognizing her as a kind person. She looked perplexed and asked if he knew her. He replied that of course he did, that she was a university student who often visited her cafeteria. Upon realizing he was one of her valued customers, she became very happy and introduced herself as Canon. Liang did the same. Suddenly, they heard a noise in the background and saw a mysterious door. As Canon was about to open it, she screamed, saying she saw rats and, scared, asked him to carry her around to another side. Picking up where Tito Liang's perspective left off, he held the girl tightly as she nearly fell. Worried, he asked her what was wrong. She explained that she had been trapped there for 55 days and hadn't eaten anything, feeling very weak. Tito Liang reassured her not to worry and to wait a moment while he prepared a delicious meal. As he began taking out his products, Canon became serious and whispered to herself that all that food would be hers, surprised by how much he had. She became very happy, spotting a large fish. As she reached for an egg, she noticed it disappear, becoming very confused. It turned out that no one could steal from Tito Liang's stall. Annoyed, Canon began to consider her next move, planning to deal with this fool later. As she was about to reach for her dagger, she was surprised to see Liang suddenly ask, "Were you looking for this?" He held up her dagger. She was shocked that he had it and realized he must have taken it when he pretended to stumble earlier. Curiously, she asked if she could borrow it, explaining that she didn't have a knife to cut the ingredients. He said it was fine and asked her not to misunderstand, explaining that a weak girl like her needed something for protection and promising to return it as soon as she was finished. Liang, who had already prepared the food, told her it was no problem but cautioned her to be careful as it was very sharp. Despite having the dagger in her hands, she put her plan into motion and declared that he would die for being so foolishly generous. But to her misfortune, her attack was blocked by the cart. She was surprised that he had superpowers. Growing serious, she prepared to unleash one of her powerful fire kicks. Liang, despite appearing foolish, was always vigilant and trusted no one. He swiftly incapacitated her with pepper spray and, like a madman, began throwing salt at her, shouting at anyone else in the room to leave or he would kill their partner. From the room, two small children emerged, shouting that they should release their boss and that they weren't afraid of him and would eliminate him for hurting her. This obviously resulted in a complete failure of her plan, a total FFE in the original text. Liang scolded them, saying that if no one educated them, they would become criminals when they grew up. Cannon, struggling to get up, shouted that he shouldn't hurt them and should come for her if he dared. Tito Yang said he understood and threw the children towards her. 3 Doritos later, the story jumped forward to see Cannon having tied up the children. She remarked that it seemed many people had fallen into her trap, adding that she had never failed before. Curiously, Liang asked her how he had seen through her deception. He explained that only fools would fall for such an obvious trap. From the moment he arrived, he had noticed several empty packages and cans on the floor, and supposedly she hadn't eaten in 5 days. Furthermore, there was a fresh blood stain, and she had no wounds. It was obvious that they had attacked other people. The child called Kong shouted that those people deserved it for trying to take advantage of their boss. On the other hand, the girl named Yuna argued that they never hurt good people, only those who were bad, like him. This made Liang feel very guilty, as he didn't consider himself a bad person. He retorted, asking how she could know who was good or bad in the apocalypse and that no one could be blamed for trying to survive. Tito Liang conceded that she was right, and now that they were in his hands, they couldn't blame him for what he was about to do to them. He ominously mentioned that it had been a long time since he had tasted fresh meat. The children began to cry, believing he was going to eat them. Of course, it was a lie, intended only to scare them. Yuna pleaded with him to let them go and eat her instead. Kong and Yuna refused to leave her, insisting that he eat them and free their boss. Tito Liang, witnessing such loyalty, began to feel a little guilty. Suddenly, Yuna started coughing. The zombie girl, Cannon, asked him to please release her because Yuna was hurt, and the rope was cutting off her breath. Liang yelled at her, asking if she thought he was stupid and that she would try to kill him the moment he released her. He was amazed at how well the little girl was acting. They insisted they weren't lying, and if he didn't let her go quickly. Tito Liang still didn't trust them. He asked Jean to evaluate her condition. Jean replied there was no problem and, after a moment, stated that the girl had a severe inflammation in her body and was already infected. If she didn't receive treatment immediately, she only had 3 days left. Suddenly, little Yuna started spitting up blood, and Liang quickly released them. He watched as she fainted. Sometime later, they had changed Yuna's bandage, and Tito Liang was walking, slightly sheltered, because someone had shot at him. He wondered who was monstrous enough to hurt a child. The zombie girl, Cannon, mentioned it was the Thunder Legion and recounted what had happened. When she sensed something was wrong outside, she had immediately closed her shop, even though there were customers inside. Hours later, they learned of the zombie outbreak. The government had asked them not to go out, and initially, they had listened. Everything was fine at first, but as soon as food became scarce, true human nature emerged. A man stole food from little Yuna, using the excuse that a little one like her should give up her share. Yuna's mother, called Yura, told him that it didn't matter if he agreed or not, he was taking it. Khan, witnessing this, bit the man to try and get him to give back the food to his little sister. Obviously, it didn't help and only angered the man further. He was about to teach Kong a lesson, but Yura intervened with a kick, throwing him to the ground. She held Kong in her arms and shouted to everyone that there wasn't enough food and why should this man take it from others. Angrily, the man yelled back that a simple bread wasn't food. Cannon mentioned that she didn't care if she was left hungry and that she knew she didn't owe him anything. If he didn't like it, he could go out and look for food himself, knowing he was too cowardly to face the zombies. This supposed insult enraged the man. Suddenly, an old woman and a couple asked him to give them more food, promising to pay him double when everything was over. He told them that this was a cafe, not a store, and that a girl wouldn't have a large stockpile inside. He yelled back that he was lying and should open that room so they could see. Cannon told them that it only contained clothes, but they didn't believe her and demanded he open the door because they had seen him always locking it. Yura pleaded with everyone to calm down, saying that the boss had been very kind to them. They didn't care and grabbed her, holding her tightly between them all. Meanwhile, the thug forcibly opened the door and upon breaking through, found himself face to face with a rack of dresses. Suddenly, a car crashed through the storefront and a group of men emerged, introducing themselves as the Thunder Legion. They demanded food immediately, threatening to eliminate everyone if their demands weren't met. The rat-like man pointed out Cannon as the one who knew where the food was. Seeing the pretty girls, the Thunder Legion members decided to take them as well. Yura fled with the children amidst the chaos. On the other side, the boyfriend of one of the Legion members had given them up to save his own skin. One of the Legionnaires managed to grab Cannon, but she swiftly pushed him away with her dagger. Enraged, he was about to kill her when little Yuna, seeing her sister in danger, opened fire with a gun. She stepped in front of Cannon and took the shot herself. Everyone was stunned into silence by this act. The leader of the rats and his subordinate took cover, knowing the noise would attract zombies. He ordered his men to kill everyone and seize the supplies. Gradually, they began eliminating the remaining people. The only ones left were Cannon and the children. As they were about to be killed, Yura lunged at the attacker, preventing him from shooting. She pleaded with anyone to take care of her children. Cannon felt where Yura was holding her tightly, and she escaped through the window. Yura knew they would follow, so she grabbed a grenade from the thug and seconds later, the entire place exploded. Returning to the present, Liang was overcome with grief, crying because he couldn't protect Yuna. Yuna, just waking up, told him not to cry and that if she died, she would be able to meet her mother. The others told her not to say such things. Jean, observing the scene, remarked that it was very sad. Liang snapped at him to be quiet, reminding him that Jean had almost gotten him killed earlier, even if it wasn't by a monster. He declared that if he could help a child, he would, and curiously asked Jean if there was any medicine to save her. Jean replied that there wasn't readily available medicine, but he could upgrade the street stall for better options. However, he mentioned another possibility. The second function of the food stand was that dishes prepared by the owner could have therapeutic effects. The effectiveness depended on the owner's skill. Better food meant better results. With this in mind, Tito Liang entered Master Chef mode. 3 Doritos later, he had prepared a delicious waffle. He offered it to Yuna, who thanked him wholeheartedly, calling him older brother. As soon as she took a bite, she exclaimed how delicious it was. Moments later, she told Liang and Cannon that she felt much better. Cannon touched Yuna's forehead and was amazed to find her fever had gone down. Perplexed and amused, she asked him what that waffle was. Tito Liang said he couldn't reveal his secret. Even though Yuna was much better, he explained that she needed to eat more to fully recover, and that the waffle was just a gift. Next time, she'd have to pay. Cannon told him it was no problem and offered him all the food Tito Liang had at his stall. He clarified that he already had plenty of food, what he wanted was her to work for him. The children, misunderstanding, refused, shouting that it seemed he was a bad man. He realized they had misinterpreted his intentions and, very seriously, explained that he wanted her to work for him, and not to worry, as Cannon would provide food and lodging. The children, recognizing it was a very good offer, eventually agreed. A few minutes later, Cannon handed him a contract. As soon as Tito Liang read it, he recoiled in shock. This fool wanted a vacation first among many other demands. He yelled at her, asking if she thought he was stupid. Suddenly, a group of men entered the place. A masked man told his friends that his nose was never wrong and the delicious smell led them here. Kong noticed that he wanted to take the waffle away from his little sister, and Ian wasn't going to allow it. Kong stepped in front of Yuna, yelling at them that if they wanted to fight, they would have to go through him. Tito Liang interjected, saying no, and if the man was hungry, he could prepare one for him. The masked man's companion, called Feng, asked his boss, Han, if he could try it. Han agreed and curiously asked Liang the price, knowing it wouldn't be free. Tito Liang, sensing these guys had crystals, presented them with a menu. Han was surprised that a waffle cost 10 crystals. Liang explained that it wasn't easy to make a living in the apocalypse, and it was a fair price. Han conceded he was right and ordered one for 10 crystals. While Tito Liang was preparing it, Kong took Han by the arm and asked him to wait a moment. He became visibly nervous. Fong laughed, realizing the boss's old problem had resurfaced. He became shy around beautiful women. Yang knew he had made a good decision hiring Cannon. Without further delay, he entered MasterChef mode again. 3 Doritos later, the group was fascinated by the taste of the delicious waffle. Han, true to his word, paid him and curiously asked what else Tito had. Liang listed everything: fried chicken, roast beef, soft drinks, and much more. Ju, marveling, asked for 10 of each. Liang apologized, saying he didn't have enough supplies for such a large order. Ju told him not to worry and just tell him what he needed, and he would bring it to him. Fong remarked to Han that this guy seemed to be a big shot, and if they could get supplies from him, they wouldn't have to risk their lives searching for them. Tito Liang knew he was right, and as he was about to speak, a boy ran in, telling Han that he and the others had just arrived and were badly hurt. Tito Liang was shocked to see that they were the same thugs Han had fought earlier. Curious, he asked his men who had attacked them. They said they didn't know. It was some crazy guy shouting that he was the chosen one. Obviously, they hadn't believed him, but when they attacked, a kind of barrier repelled their attacks. Han was surprised, having never heard of such power. Suddenly, he realized it sounded similar to when he had attacked Yang. As soon as he turned to look, he recognized Liang trying to escape. The angry Han declared that he would eliminate him and wouldn't allow anyone to hurt his group. The Thunder Legion member, Ju, hearing this, curiously asked if Han was the boss. He confirmed that he was, and if they needed anything, they shouldn't hesitate to ask. Suddenly, the children rushed towards Han, yelling that his men had hurt their boss and their mother. Han easily stopped them. Fong interjected, saying that even though they were thieves, they never hurt women and children. Cannon, not believing him and refusing to listen, yelled at them to release the children. Han listened and began launching simultaneous attacks. Tito Han easily dodged them. Seeing this, Fong calmed down and yelled at Han's men to help him. They refused, saying Han had to overcome his psychological problem with women on his own. While they were fighting, tentacles watched them from the ceiling. Returning to Liang, he remembered he only had one shield block left and, not wanting to die, was about to run away. But the thugs recognized him and shouted to their boss that this was the guy who had hurt them. Han turned, enraged, and easily sent Cannon flying, hitting the stall. Han shouted at Tito Liang that not only had he hurt his brothers but also stolen their crystals, so he must pay with his life. Kong shouted that their boss wasn't afraid of him and would defeat him. Fong remarked that their boss was a real man, unlike others who couldn't look a woman in the eye, yelling at them to be quiet because they weren't helping and were only making him angrier. They watched as Tito Han destroyed the ground with a single blow. Both Cannon and the children knew this guy was a monster. Fong told Liang that his boss was super powerful and he knew who they had offended, leaving him no choice but to evade Han's attacks. He knew if he took a direct hit, he'd be out of the game, but he couldn't manage to dodge one in time. With no other option, he braced himself to block as best he could, but even that simple attack caused John to spit blood. Han acknowledged that he was resilient for enduring one of his blows, but still not his opponent. Han became serious and landed another attack that violently slammed Liang against the wall. Tito Liang knew that at this rate, he would die. His only way to survive was to use the cart's rebound effect, and the stronger the blow, the greater the rebound. He fiercely rushed towards Han and passed between his legs, and like a dog, pulled down his pants to buy himself some time. Everyone who saw this burst out laughing. Han, supposedly furious at such humiliation, was about to pulverize Liang for such disrespect. Meanwhile, Kong took advantage of the distraction and managed to get Han to release Cannon. Kong quickly grabbed his dagger and went to eliminate Han, driven by the loss of his mother and wanting to protect his new boss. Fong, however, wasn't going to let the boss be hurt. With no other option, Tito Liang opened fire with his gun. Realizing this, Feng threw the cart, because if he didn't, Kong would die. He barely managed to save Kong, but as a consequence, the cart was completely destroyed. Liang knew this was what happened when he tried to be a hero. Suddenly, a powerful explosion occurred, and from it emerged the zombie waifu, Zru. She sent everyone flying with a single punch. Perplexed, they wondered where this woman had come from. Han shouted to them that she was the zombie they had caught earlier. Hearing that, the Thunder Legion members started shooting, but it was no use. Zru dodged the bullets as if they were nothing. Tito Liang noticed these crazy people were going to damage his cart, or what was left of it. He barely managed to pull the remains to safety. On the other hand, Han launched a missile at Zru. Seeing Tito Liang protecting him, Han also protected Liang, narrowly avoiding the missile himself, which exploded elsewhere. The others opened fire as if there were no tomorrow. The children did their best to avoid the attacks. Zru noticed that Tito Liang had abandoned her, which upset her, and she threw a tube towards the bald thug. This caused his gun to fire on its own, and everyone quickly took cover, fearing being riddled with bullets. Seconds later, the cartridge finally ran out. Everyone wondered where the zombie girl had gone. Suddenly, she reappeared next to Tito Liang, perched on a tree branch. He ran, along with the others, fearing a bite would be disastrous. Zru suddenly sensed an intention towards Liang and rushed towards him. Han wondered why that thing was only following Liang. Suddenly, he noticed hundreds of tentacles descending, and Zru let herself be caught by them, abruptly slammed against the wall. From the hole created by the missile explosion, the mutant octopus from the beginning of the story emerged.